Maria Santos stood in the cold metal briefing room aboard the UES Intrepid. The ship hummed quietly around her as she watched the holographic display flicker to life in the center of the room. The image showed a dark planet covered in strange purple clouds and massive alien structures that looked like twisted metal and crystal mixed together. This was Kythera Prime, the homeworld of their enemy. Colonel Frank Mitchell stepped forward and pointed at the display. His face looked tired, and his voice was heavy when he spoke. "This is our target," he said. "The Zephyrian Empire has built their main command center here. They also have a weapon that can destroy entire solar systems. Every time we have tried to attack this place, we have failed. Most of our people died." Maria looked around the room at the other Marines. Some of them had been fighting this war for 3 years. Others were new, like her friend Jake Rodriguez, who sat in the front row. All of them looked worried as they stared at the alien fortress on the display. "The planet has shields that stop our ships from getting close," Mitchell continued. "We cannot bomb it from space. We cannot land a full army. The only way in is through one small opening in their defense system. Someone would have to drop down through their atmosphere alone." The room became very quiet. Maria could hear the air recycling system making soft sounds in the walls. She could feel her heart beating faster as she listened to the colonel explain the mission. Once inside, that person would need to reach the shield generators deep in the fortress. They would have to destroy them from the inside. Then they would need to hold that position until our main fleet arrives. The computer says the chances of surviving this mission are less than 3%. Jake turned in his seat to look at Maria. His eyes were wide with worry. She had known him since basic training. They had grown up in the same neighborhood in Detroit. His family had come from Mexico just like hers had. Both of them had joined the military to protect Earth and make their parents proud. "I need a volunteer," Mitchell said. His voice was firm, but Maria could hear the sadness in it. "I will not order anyone to take this mission. It has to be someone who chooses to go." The room stayed silent for a long time. Maria could hear people breathing and shifting in their seats. She thought about her mother and father back on Earth. They had worked so hard to give her a better life. Her mother cleaned offices at night and her father fixed cars during the day. They had always told her that some things were worth fighting for even when the fight seemed impossible. Maria stood up. The sound of her chair scraping against the floor seemed very loud in the quiet room. Everyone turned to look at her. She was not the biggest Marine in the room or the strongest. She was just a staff sergeant who had grown up poor in Detroit. But she knew what she had to do. "I volunteer," she said. Her voice did not shake even though her hands were trembling. Mitchell looked at her for a long moment. "Santos, do you understand what this mission means? You will probably not come back." "Yes, sir," Maria said. "I understand." Jake jumped up from his seat. "Maria, you cannot do this. This is suicide. Let someone else go." Maria looked at her friend. She could see tears starting in his eyes. "Jake, if I do not go, who will?" We all heard what the colonel said. Someone has to do this or Earth dies. Other Marines started talking at once. Some of them tried to convince her to change her mind. Others said they should go instead. But Maria had already decided. She had made her choice the moment Mitchell explained the mission. "Enough," Mitchell said loudly. The room became quiet again. "Santos, report to the equipment bay in 1 hour." "Get your gear ready." Maria nodded and walked toward the door. Jake followed her out into the corridor. The hallway was bright with white lights and the walls were covered with pipes and wires. Their footsteps echoed as they walked. "Maria, please." "Think about this," Jake said. "Your parents need you to come home. I need you to come home." Maria stopped walking and turned to face him. "Jake, remember when we were kids? Remember that story my father used to tell us about his grandfather who fought in World War II? He said that sometimes one person has to stand up so that everyone else can be safe." "That was just a story," Jake said. "No," Maria said, "it was not just a story. It was about what it means to be human. It means that when something terrible is going to happen to people you love, you do whatever you can to stop it." They reached the equipment bay where Maria kept. Her gear, the room was full of weapons and armor hanging on metal racks. She went to her locker and started pulling out her rifle and ammunition. Jake watched her work but did not say anything more. Maria checked her pulse rifle carefully. She had modified it herself to fire faster and hit harder than the standard version. She loaded fresh power cells and made sure the targeting system was working correctly. Then she put on her combat armor piece by piece. The armor was black and silver and covered with sensors and communication equipment. The ship's computer system spoke to her through speakers in the ceiling. "Staff Sergeant Santos, this is Apollo. I have your mission data ready. Send it to my helmet display," Maria said. "Mission parameters uploaded. Drop pod Bay 7 is prepared for departure. Estimated flight time to target is 47 minutes. Maria finished putting on her armor and picked up her rifle. She looked at Jake one more time. He was trying not to cry, but she could see how scared he was for her. "Tell my parents I love them," she said. "Tell them I died doing something that mattered." "You are not dead yet," Jake said. "Maybe you will make it back." Maria smiled at him. "Maybe I will." She walked to the drop pod bay. The corridor seemed longer than usual, and her boots felt heavy on the metal floor. Other crew members stopped what they were doing to watch her pass. Some of them saluted. Others just nodded with respect. The drop pod bay was a large room with several small spacecraft attached to the bottom of the ship. Each pod was just big enough for one person and looked like a metal egg with engines on the back. Technicians were checking the systems on pod 7 and loading it with extra ammunition and medical supplies. Maria climbed into the pod and strapped herself into the pilot seat. The inside was cramped and filled with screens and controls. She could see Earth through a small window. It looked small and blue and beautiful against the black of space. "All systems check complete," one of the technicians said. "You are ready for launch whenever you give the word." Maria took a deep breath and looked at Earth one more time. Then she reached for the launch button. "This is Staff Sergeant Maria Santos," she said into her radio. "Beginning drop sequence now." The drop pod shot away from the UES Intrepid like a bullet fired from a giant gun. Maria felt her body pressed hard against the seat as the small spacecraft accelerated toward Kythera Prime. Through the small window, she could see the alien planet, growing larger and larger. The purple clouds swirled around dark continents, and she could see flashes of light where the enemy was firing at her. "Apollo, give me tactical display," Maria said into her helmet microphone. The computer's voice filled the pod, displaying enemy defensive positions now. "I count 47 orbital platforms and over 200 automated interceptor craft. They are all targeting your pod." Red dots appeared on Maria's helmet screen showing where the enemy weapons were located. There were so many of them that the display looked like a swarm of angry red insects. Each dot represented enough firepower to destroy her pod completely. "Santos, this is Captain Lisa Wells aboard the Intrepid. We are beginning our diversionary attack now. This should draw some of their fire away from you." Maria could see explosions lighting up space behind her as the human fleet engaged the outer defenses. Bright blue and green energy beams crossed the darkness like deadly fireworks. Some of the red dots on her screen changed direction to face the fleet instead of her pod. "Thanks for the help, Captain," Maria said. "Beginning evasive maneuvers now." The first enemy shots reached her position, and Maria threw the pod into a spinning dive toward the planet. Energy beams passed so close to her craft that she could see them through the window. They looked like streams of liquid fire that could melt through anything they touched. Maria had trained for this moment for months, but the real thing was much worse than any simulation. The pod shook and rattled as she pushed it through impossible turns and spirals. Warning lights flashed on her control panel as the engines overheated from the strain. "Hull temperature rising beyond safe limits," Apollo announced. "Recommend reducing speed." "Cannot reduce speed," Maria said through gritted teeth. "Too many targets locked onto us." A group of interceptor craft appeared on her screen. They were small triangular ships that moved like insects. Each one carried enough missiles to destroy a building. Maria watched them accelerate toward her position and knew She had only seconds to react. She fired the pod's small defensive weapons at the lead interceptor. The shots connected, and the alien craft exploded in a ball of purple flame. But there were 5 more behind it, and they were already launching missiles. Maria dove toward the planet's atmosphere and watched the missiles follow her down the air. Around the pod began to glow red as friction heated the outer hull. She could feel sweat running down her face inside her helmet as the temperature in the pod started to rise. "Come on," she whispered to herself. "Just a little farther." The missiles were gaining on her when she reached the thick part of the atmosphere. The alien weapons were not designed to work in heavy air, and 3 of them burned up before they could reach her. But 2 missiles kept coming, and Maria had to use every trick she knew to avoid them. She rolled the pod sideways and dove into a canyon between 2 mountain ranges. The missiles followed, but they were moving too fast to turn. Quickly, one of them crashed into a cliff wall and exploded. The other one passed over her and disappeared into the clouds above. "First wave of interceptors destroyed," Maria reported. "But I'm seeing more contacts approaching." The pod's hull was glowing white-hot now, and pieces of the outer armor were breaking away. Maria could smell burning electronics and see sparks flying from damaged systems. Half of her control panel was dark, and the engines were making strange noises. "Santos, you have 12 more interceptors incoming from the north," Captain Wells said, also detecting energy weapon fire from ground installations. Maria looked through the window and saw bright flashes coming from the surface below. The Zephyrians had built huge guns into the mountains, and they were all firing at her now. The energy beams lit up the clouds like lightning as they searched for her pod. She dove lower and flew between the peaks of the alien mountains. The landscape below looked like something from a nightmare. Strange crystal formations jutted up from the ground, and rivers of glowing liquid flowed between black rocks. Everything was colored in shades of purple and green that hurt to look at. Another wave of missiles launched from the interceptors above. Maria could see them on her screen like a cloud of death falling toward her. She had nowhere left to run, and the pod was too damaged to outmaneuver them all. "This is it," she thought. "I am going to die before I even reach the ground." But then something unexpected happened. The pod's damaged hull began to break apart in exactly the right way. Large pieces of metal flew off and confused the missile targeting systems. Most of the weapons lost their lock and flew past her harmlessly. 2 missiles still found their target and exploded against the pod's rear section. The blast threw Maria forward against her restraints so hard that she thought her ribs were broken. Alarm screamed in her ears, and the cabin filled with smoke. "Hull breach detected," Apollo said. "Life support systems failing. Emergency landing required immediately." Maria looked at her altimeter and saw that she was only 2 kilometers above the ground. The pod was falling fast and spinning out of control. She reached for the emergency controls with hands that felt numb and heavy. "Firing retro thrusters," she said. But when she pressed the button, only half of them worked. The pod kept spinning as it fell toward the alien jungle below. Maria could see the ground rushing up to meet her through the smoke and flames. Huge trees with purple leaves covered the landscape like a carpet. She aimed for what looked like a clearing between them and hoped the pod would hold together for a few more seconds. The retro thrusters fired one more time just before impact. The pod hit the ground so hard that Maria's vision went black for a moment. When she opened her eyes again, the cabin was full of steam and the smell of burning metal. "Apollo damage report," she said weakly. "Main systems offline. Hull integrity at 15%. Life support operational for approximately 4 hours. Maria unstrapped herself from the pilot seat and immediately felt pain in her chest. At least 2 ribs were cracked, and her left shoulder felt wrong when she moved it. But she was alive and on the ground, and that was better than she had expected a few minutes ago. She gathered her rifle and equipment pack and opened the pod's hatch. Hot alien air rushed in, carrying smells she had never experienced before. The jungle around her was full of strange sounds, and the light had an odd quality that made everything look like it was underwater. Maria climbed out of the smoking wreckage and looked around. The trees were taller than any on Earth, and their leaves glowed softly in the dim light. She could hear things moving in the undergrowth but could not see what they were. In the distance, she could see the glow of the Zephyrian fortress rising above the jungle canopy. "Captain Wells, this is Santos," she said into her radio. "I am on the ground and mobile. Beginning approach to primary target." "Good to hear your voice, Santos," Wells replied. "Be advised that enemy patrol units are converging on your crash site. You have maybe 10 minutes before they arrive." Maria checked her rifle and started walking toward the fortress. Every step sent pain through her damaged ribs, but she ignored it. She had come too far to stop now. Behind her, the drop pod continued to burn and smoke, marking her landing site for any enemy forces that might be looking for her. The alien jungle was unlike anything she had ever seen. Plants with silver bark grew next to flowers that looked like they were made of metal. Streams of water ran uphill and rocks floated in the air without any support. Everything about this place violated the laws of physics as humans understood them. Maria walked carefully through the undergrowth, trying not to make noise. She could hear the sound of aircraft in the distance and knew that the enemy was already searching for her. The fortress was still 20 kilometers away, and she had to cross hostile territory to reach it, but she was alive and she had her mission. That was enough for now. Maria had been walking through the alien jungle for 3 hours when she found the maintenance tunnel. The opening was hidden behind a wall of purple vines that seemed to move on their own. According to her mission data, these tunnels carried power and water to the outer sections of the Zephyrian fortress. She used her combat knife to cut through the vines and crawled into the narrow tunnel. The walls were made of some kind of living metal that felt warm to the touch. Strange lights pulsed along the ceiling like a heartbeat, and she could hear liquid flowing through pipes somewhere in the darkness. The tunnel sloped downward for almost a kilometer before it opened into a larger corridor. Maria checked her scanner and saw that she was now inside the outer perimeter of the fortress. The architecture around her was completely alien. The walls curved in ways that made no sense, and the floor seemed to bend upward at the edges. "This place does not follow normal rules," she whispered to herself. Maria moved carefully through the corridor, checking each corner before she advanced. Her ribs still hurt from the crash landing, but the pain medication in her first aid kit was helping. She could hear mechanical sounds echoing from deeper in the complex, and occasionally the floor would vibrate as some huge machine operated somewhere below. The first Zephyrian patrol appeared around a corner just as Maria was checking her map display. There were 3 of them, tall crystalline beings that looked like they were made of living glass. They moved in perfect coordination. Their thoughts connected through some kind of mental link. Maria had studied these creatures during her training, but seeing them in person was different. They were beautiful in a way that was almost hypnotic. Light seemed to flow through their transparent bodies, and their faces showed an intelligence that was both ancient and completely inhuman, but they were also the enemy, and they would kill her without hesitation if they discovered her presence. Maria raised her rifle and aimed carefully. The Zephyrians had not noticed her yet because they communicated through thought rather than sound. This gave her a few precious seconds to line up her shots. She fired 3 times in rapid succession. The modified pulse rifle made almost no noise as it sent coherent energy beams through the alien beings. All 3 Zephyrians collapsed without making a sound, their crystalline bodies shattering into fragments that dissolved into glowing dust. 3 targets down, Maria reported quietly into her radio. Continuing toward primary objective. The corridor ahead branched into multiple passages that led deeper into the fortress. Maria consulted her scanner and chose the path that would take her toward the shield generator complex. But as she walked further into the alien structure, she began to notice something very strange. The walls were not just made of metal and crystal. They were alive. She could see veins of some kind of organic material running through the surface, and they pulsed with the same rhythm as the lights in the ceiling. The entire fortress seemed to be breathing. "Apollo, are you getting readings on the structure composition?" Maria asked. "Affirmative. The fortress appears to be a hybrid of biological and technological systems. It is part building and part living organism. This explained why the human intelligence reports had been so inconsistent. The fortress was not a static structure that could be mapped and studied. It was a creature that could change and adapt. The corridors she was walking through might not exist tomorrow, and new passages could grow overnight. Maria adjusted her approach accordingly. Instead of trying to follow the planned route, she began to move with the natural flow of the organic systems around her. When she found areas where the biological sensors seemed damaged or confused, she introduced harmless bacteria from her medical kit that caused them to malfunction further. This created blind spots in the fortress's awareness, small areas where the living building could not sense her presence. She moved from one blind spot to another like stepping stones across a river, always staying ahead of the patrols that were searching for her. The deeper she went, the more alien everything became. Gravity seemed to work differently in some sections, and she found herself walking on walls or ceilings without falling. Streams of data flowed through neural pathways embedded in the structure itself, carrying information at the speed of thought. After 2 more hours of careful movement, Maria reached the shield generator complex. It was housed in a vast chamber that looked like the inside of a living heart. Massive organic conduits carried energy from the planet's core to the shield projectors that protected the entire fortress from orbital bombardment, but standing guard over the generators was something Maria had not expected to find. Commander Veltar was the most feared warrior in the Zephyrian military. Intelligence reports said he had never lost a battle in over 300 years of combat. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, and his crystalline body was covered with weapons that seemed to grow directly from his flesh. "So a human has finally reached the heart of our fortress," Veltar said. His voice came from speakers embedded in the walls rather than from his mouth. "I have been waiting for this moment." Maria raised her rifle but knew that a direct confrontation would be almost impossible to win. Veltar had reflexes that were 10 times faster than any human, and weapons that could cut through her armor like paper. She needed to find another way. "Why have you been waiting?" she asked, hoping to buy time while she studied the chamber. "Because your species interests me," Veltar replied. "You are so small and weak compared to us. Your lives are brief flickers of light in an infinite darkness. Yet you fight with a determination that defies logic. I want to understand what drives you." Maria noticed that the organic conduits carrying energy to the shield generators were connected to the chamber's walls through delicate neural interfaces. If she could damage those connections, it might disrupt the entire system, but she would need to get past Veltar first. "What drives us is simple," Maria said. "We protect the people we love." Veltar raised one of his weapon arms, and energy began to build around it like captured lightning. "Love is a weakness. It makes you vulnerable." "No," Maria said. "Love is what makes us strong." The battle began when Veltar fired a beam of coherent energy that would have cut Maria in half if she had not already started moving. She rolled behind one of the generator housings and fired back with her pulse rifle. The shots struck Veltar's crystalline armor and created spiderweb cracks, but did not penetrate deeply enough to cause serious damage. Veltar moved with impossible speed, crossing the chamber in seconds and bringing his blade weapons down where Maria had been hiding. But she was no longer there. Human unpredictability was her greatest advantage against an opponent who fought according to logical algorithms. The fight continued across multiple levels of the chamber as Maria used every surface and obstacle to avoid Veltar's attacks. She fired when she could and ran when she had to, slowly wearing down her opponent while taking damage herself. Her armor was scored by near misses, and she could feel blood running down her left arm from a shallow cut, but gradually she began to understand Veltar's fighting patterns. The Zephyrian was incredibly skilled, but he fought according to established strategies that had worked for centuries. He expected his opponents to behave rationally and efficiently. Maria did neither. She made attacks that seemed suicidal and retreated when she had advantages. She used tactics that violated every rule of military science. And slowly this began to confuse Veltar's combat algorithms. The end came when Maria deliberately allowed herself to be cornered near one of the neural interfaces. Veltar moved in for what he thought would be the killing blow, but Maria had positioned herself exactly where she needed to be. As his blade swept toward her, she fired her rifle directly into the neural connection behind her. The energy feedback from the damaged interface coursed through Veltar's body like liquid fire. His crystalline structure began to crack and shatter as the organic systems of the fortress turned against him. He fell to the chamber floor and dissolved into glowing fragments. Maria stood alone in the chamber, breathing hard and bleeding from multiple wounds. But the shield generators were now vulnerable, and she had work to do. She pulled explosive charges from her equipment pack and began placing them on the critical control nodes. "Shield generators marked for destruction," she reported. "Beginning. Timer sequence now." The explosives would detonate in exactly 3 minutes, giving her time to reach a safe distance before the entire system collapsed. But as she prepared to leave the chamber, alarms began sounding throughout the fortress. "All security units converge on generator complex," a voice announced in the alien language. Intruder must not escape. Maria checked her ammunition and found that she had less than half her original supply remaining. Her armor was damaged and her body was running on adrenaline and determination. But the hardest part of her mission was just beginning. She had to hold this position until the human fleet arrived, and that would not happen for another 47 minutes. The explosions that destroyed the shield generators shook the entire fortress like an earthquake. Maria felt the vibrations through the floor as the massive organic structure screamed in pain. Emergency lights flashed red throughout the complex, and she could hear the sound of thousands of Zephyrian defenders mobilizing to stop her. "This is Santos," she said into her radio. "Shield generators are down. Repeat, planetary defenses are offline." "Confirmed, Santos," came the voice of Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker from the fleet. "We are beginning our approach now." "Estimated arrival time is 47 minutes. Can you hold your position that long?" Maria looked around the generator chamber and quickly assessed her tactical situation. She had taken position behind the largest piece of equipment near the center of the room. Her remaining ammunition would last maybe 20 minutes if she was careful. Her armor had multiple breach points, and her left arm was not working properly from the fight with Veltar. "I will hold," she said simply. The first wave of enemy forces arrived within minutes. Maria could hear them moving through the corridors outside the chamber in perfect coordination. Their crystalline feet made sharp clicking sounds on the organic floor, and she could see the glow of their weapons charging up. 20 Zephyrian soldiers entered the chamber from 3 different entrances. They moved like a single organism, each one covering the others as they advanced toward her position. Maria waited until they were halfway across the room before opening fire. Her pulse rifle cut down the lead elements before they could take cover. The coherent energy beams shattered crystalline armor and sent fragments spinning through the air. But the surviving Zephyrians immediately adapted their approach and began using the generator housings as protection. The battle settled into a deadly pattern. The Zephyrians would advance under covering fire while Maria picked off any target that showed itself. When they got too close, she would use explosive grenades to force them back. But with each exchange, she used precious ammunition that she could not replace. "Santos, how are you holding up down there?" Parker asked. "Still breathing," Maria replied as she ducked behind cover to avoid a stream of energy bolts. "But they are bringing more troops every few minutes." The second wave included heavy weapons specialists who carried beam cannons that could punch through the generator housings. Maria had to constantly change position as her cover was systematically destroyed around her. She used every piece of debris and every shadow to stay one step ahead of the enemy targeting systems. 20 minutes into the defense, her original position was completely untenable. Maria fell back to a smaller defensive perimeter around the main control console in the center of the chamber. From here she could see all the entrances but had very little cover remaining. "Ammunition at 30%, she reported. "Enemy count approximately 60 and rising." "Hold on, Santos," Parker said. "We are accelerating our approach. New ETA is 35 minutes. Maria knew she would never last that long with conventional tactics. She needed to change the rules of engagement if she was going to survive. Looking around the chamber, she noticed that many of the organic conduits were still carrying energy even though the shield generators were destroyed. She began targeting the conduits themselves with her rifle. When the energy beams disrupted the flow, it caused feedback that damaged other systems throughout the fortress. Lights went out in sections of the chamber, and some of the Zephyrian weapons stopped working properly. "Clever human," one of the enemy commanders said through speakers in the walls. "But you only delay the inevitable." "Delaying is all I need to do," Maria replied. The third wave included elite assault troops with personal shields that deflected her rifle fire. Maria had to use her remaining grenades to crack their defenses, and even then she could only slow their advance. They reached the edge of her final perimeter, and she found herself fighting hand-to-hand with crystalline warriors twice her size. Her combat knife was designed to penetrate Zephyrian armor, but using it meant getting close enough for them to strike back. Maria took several cuts from their blade weapons and felt her strength beginning to fade from blood loss. But she kept fighting because she had no other choice. "Santos, your vital signs are dropping," Parker said with concern in his voice. "What is your status?" "Still here," Maria gasped as she rolled away from another attack. Still fighting? But she knew she was reaching the end of her capabilities. Her ammunition was almost gone, and her body was failing from accumulated damage. The Zephyrians were only meters away from overrunning her position, and she had no way to stop them. That was when she noticed the power core indicators on the control console behind her. The fortress drew its energy from exotic matter reactions deep in the planet's crust. If those reactions became unstable, the resulting explosion would destroy everything for hundreds of kilometers in all directions. "Parker, I need you to listen." "Carefully," Maria said as she fired her last magazine at the advancing enemy. "I'm going to overload the fortress power core." "Santos, do not do anything crazy down there. We are only 20 minutes out." 20 minutes is too long," Maria said. She could see Zephyrian soldiers climbing over the debris toward her final position. "If they retake this room, they can restore the shields before you arrive." Maria reached the control console and began accessing the power management systems. The alien interface was completely different from human technology, but the basic principles were the same. She found the safety controls that prevented core overload and began disabling them one by one. "Santos, there has to be another way," Parker pleaded. "Do not do this." "Some things are worth the price," Maria said as she worked. "Tell my parents I died protecting something that mattered." The Zephyrians realized what she was doing, and their assault became desperate. Energy beams burned the air around her as she crouched over the console. A blade weapon cut through her backpack and missed her spine by centimeters. But she kept working even as the enemy closed in. Warning indicators began flashing on the console as the power core moved toward critical overload. The fortress itself seemed to sense the approaching destruction, and the organic walls began to contract like muscles in pain. The lights flickered and power conduits burst throughout the complex. "Core overload in 90 seconds, Maria announced. "You need to be ready for immediate transport when you arrive." "We are trying, Santos, but the exotic matter is interfering with our transporter systems," Parker said. Chief Engineer Martinez thinks he can use the quantum field generators to create a brief window, but the timing has to be perfect. Maria looked up from the console to see a dozen Zephyrian warriors surrounding her position. Their weapons were trained on her, but they had not fired yet. She realized they were afraid that shooting her might disrupt the overload sequence and make the explosion even worse. "Surrender, human," their commander said. "Help us stabilize the core and you will be spared." Maria stood up slowly and raised her hands as if she was going to surrender. The Zephyrians relaxed slightly, thinking they had won. But instead of stopping the overload sequence, Maria pulled the final safety control and stepped back from the console. "Core overload in 60 seconds, she said into her radio. "Whatever you are going to do, do it now." The Zephyrians opened fire, but Maria had already thrown herself behind the last piece of intact cover in the chamber. Energy beams scorched the air above her head as she pressed herself against the floor. The fortress was shaking itself apart around them, and she could hear structural supports beginning to fail. "Santos, we have a lock on your position," Parker said urgently. "Stand by for emergency transport. 40 seconds to overload," Maria replied. "I can see the quantum field building." The transport beam materialized around her just as the first Zephyrian soldiers reached her hiding place. She felt the familiar tingling sensation as her molecules began to dissolve into energy. But the exotic matter interference was stronger than expected, and the beam kept flickering in and out of focus. 20 seconds, Maria said. "Come on." The fortress core reached critical mass just as the transport beam finally stabilized. Maria felt herself pulled through space and time as the explosion began behind her. The last thing she saw was the shocked faces of the Zephyrian warriors as they realized their fortress was about to become a star. Maria woke up in the medical bay of the UES Intrepid 3 days later. The first thing she noticed was that she could not feel her left arm. The second thing was that Jake Rodriguez was sitting beside her bed with tears in his eyes. "You are awake," he said softly. "The doctors were not sure if you would make it." Maria tried to sit up, but pain shot through her chest and back. She looked down and saw that her torso was wrapped in medical bandages and several monitoring devices were attached to her skin. Through the small window in the medical bay, she could see stars moving past as the ship traveled through hyperspace. "What happened?" she asked. Her voice was rough and speaking hurt her throat. "You blew up half a continent," Jake said with a mixture of pride and amazement. The explosion from the fortress power core destroyed every Zephyrian installation on Kythera Prime. The quantum weapon is gone. Their command center is gone. Everything is gone. Dr. Amanda Foster approached her bed carrying a medical tablet. She was the ship's chief physician and had been taking care of wounded Marines for over 15 years. Her expression was serious, but Maria could see relief in her eyes. "How bad is the damage?" Maria asked. "You have 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, severe burns on your left arm and shoulder, and about 20 smaller cuts and bruises," Foster said. "The transport beam got you out just in time, but the exotic matter exposure did some damage to your nervous system. Your left arm may never work properly again." Maria looked at her bandaged arm and tried to move her fingers. They responded, but slowly and with great effort. She had known there would be a price for the mission, but she had expected that price to be her life. "The fleet?" she asked. "Safe," Foster said. "When the fortress exploded, it took out most of the orbital defenses. 2. Admiral Hayes was able to secure the entire system without losing a single ship." Over the next few days, Maria learned the full extent of what her mission had accomplished. The destruction of Kythera Prime had broken the back of the Zephyrian war effort. Without their command center and quantum weapon, their empire was collapsing as member worlds declared independence or switched sides to join the Human Alliance. Lieutenant Commander Parker visited her on the 4th day with news from Earth. "Your parents want to talk to you," he said. "We set up a communication link." The holographic display beside her bed flickered to life, and Maria saw her mother and father standing in their small kitchen in Detroit. Her mother was crying, and her father looked like he had aged 10 years in the past week. "Mia, we were so scared," her mother said. "They told us you were on a dangerous mission, but they would not say what happened." "I am okay, Mama," Maria said. "I am coming home." "We are so proud of you," her father said. "The whole neighborhood is proud. They are calling you a hero on the news." Maria did not feel like a hero. She felt tired and hurt, and she missed being home with her family. But she was alive when she had expected to die, and that seemed like a miracle. Admiral Patricia Hayes came to see her on the 6th day. Hayes was a small woman with gray hair who had been fighting the Zephyrians longer than anyone else in the fleet. She carried herself with the authority of someone who had made life and death decisions for thousands of people. "Staff Sergeant Santos," Hayes said formally. "By order of Earth Command, you are hereby promoted to the rank of Major for extraordinary valor in combat." "Thank you, Admiral," Maria said. But I was just doing my job. No, Hayes said. You did. Much more than that. You changed the course of this war with one act of courage. But more importantly, you showed everyone else what humans are capable of when we refuse to give up. Hayes handed her a data tablet with a video message. This is from the newest class of recruits at the academy. They wanted you to see it. Maria activated the tablet and saw 100 young men and women in military uniforms standing at attention. Their instructor was a sergeant she did not recognize, but his voice was clear and strong. We are Santos's rifles, he said. We volunteer for the missions that others call impossible because one person proved that impossible does not mean hopeless. The recruits saluted the camera and Maria felt tears starting in her eyes. She had never intended to inspire anyone. She had just done what needed to be done. They are not the only ones, Hayes continued. Recruitment applications have increased by 300% since news of your mission reached Earth. Young people want to serve because you showed them that one person can make a difference. Maria spent 2 more weeks in the medical bay before she was cleared to return to duty. Her left arm was mostly functional, but she would never have full strength or feeling in it again. The doctor said she could take a medical discharge and go home to her family if she wanted, but Maria chose to stay in the service. There was still work to do, and she had learned something important during her mission. Courage was not about being unafraid. It was about deciding that something else mattered more than fear. 6 months later, Major Maria Santos stood in a briefing room on Earth addressing a new group of volunteers. These men and women had all requested assignment to special operations, units that handled the most dangerous missions. They looked at her with respect and expectation. You are here because you want to do something that matters, she told them. But I need you to understand what that really means. It does not mean being the strongest or the fastest or the smartest. It means being willing to stand up when everyone else sits down. She paused and looked around the room at their young faces. Some of them reminded her of herself at that age, full of determination and hope. My father used to tell me stories about his grandfather who fought in World War II. He said that sometimes one person has to choose to do the right thing even when the cost is terrible. I used to think those were just stories about the past. Maria gestured toward the window where Earth hung blue and beautiful in the darkness of space. But they were not stories about the past. They were lessons about what it means to be human. We are not the biggest or strongest species in the galaxy. Our lives are short and our bodies are fragile. But we have something that our enemies do. Not understand. What is that? One of the recruits asked. We have each other, Maria said. And when you fight for something bigger than yourself, when you fight to protect the people you love, you become capable of things that seem impossible. She looked at her left hand and slowly closed it into a fist. The movement was still difficult, but it was getting stronger every day. The Zephyrians thought our love for each other made us weak. They thought our short lives made us insignificant. They were wrong on both counts. Our love makes us willing to sacrifice everything for each other. And our short lives mean that every moment matters. Maria Santos had learned this lesson in the depths of an alien fortress while facing odds that should have been impossible to overcome. She had learned it when she chose to load her rifle and enter a drop pod even though everyone told her the mission was suicide. Questions? She asked the recruits. They had no questions. They understood. And that gave Maria hope for the future of humanity among the stars.